Hey YouTube, it's Devin from Head Up Throttle Down. In this video, we're going to be talking about recovery. And no, it's not the place you had to take Mima when she sold all of her furniture to cover her bingo debts, or that banging early 2000s album by the one and only Slim Shady. I'm obviously talking about off-road recovery. In this video, we're going to go over some basic tools that you'll find useful if you find yourself stuck out on the trail. And I actually have two examples of recoveries I had to perform in the previous week that I'll walk and talk you through. So if you find yourself in a similar situation, you'll know exactly what to do. First thing I want to talk about, and I know I'm going to get flamed hard in the comment section for not saying that the most important thing you need is a winch, but I actually think it's a shovel. So you can go out and get a shovel, throw it in the back of your vehicle, and I honestly think that 90% of the recovery situations you're going to find yourself in can be solved with a shovel alone, a strong back, ample time, and ample patience. Whether that's, digging your machine out so that it's no longer high-centered on whatever it is, mud or snow, so that your tires can get good contact with the ground again, or moving, different types of terrain around to get traction to your wheels again. A lot of stuff can be solved with just a simple shovel. I prefer actually a spade type shovel because I feel like it's a good compromise. It still has a lot of room to be able to, move large volumes of material, but it also has a biting edge for, cutting in to like hard terrain like clay, mud, or whatever you find out on the trail. So I honestly think the first thing you need to do, go get yourself a decent shovel. A very common item that you'll see out on the trail, and probably should be either like the second or third thing you add to your recovery bag, and that's simply either a kinetic snatch rope or just a plain old-fashioned tow strap. So you'll see a lot of guys actually using tow straps in situations where they should be using these snatch ropes, and that's simply because of availability, affordability. But if you're going to invest and only have one, I highly suggest you look at getting a snatch rope, simply because it can pretty much do everything that this thing does and will be more versatile out on the trail. So what it comes down to is basically I will use this anytime that I have to forcibly pull somebody out of being stuck. Because what this has is it has a little bit of play in its material. So what it's going to do is reduce the shock of those pulls that's distributed to the vehicles. You're less likely to break something, you're less likely to damage something, as opposed to when you see people using tow straps to pull people out of holes, is because there's going to be a lot more shock. So obviously, these are made of rope, so you're probably going to have to replace them more often. They're more prone to getting damaged, but if you take care of it, this can be an extremely versatile tool, and I find way more use for this on the trail than I do for this. Generally, I still carry one of these around with me, and I will use it primarily for towing vehicles that no longer can move under their own power, or I'll use it to an extend like a hard winching point when I don't have a long enough winch or a long enough extension. The next thing I want to talk to you about quickly is just D-rings or shackles. So basically, there's two types of shackles you'll find out on the trail, or you'll see out on the trail. They come in many different forms, but they basically come down to either a soft shackle or a hard shackle or a D-ring, as some people call them. So a D-ring is just, a hardy piece of metal with a retaining pin that you can hook a rope through, a winch through, or even a hard point on somebody's vehicle and then attach it to whatever you're pulling, or use it to, attach your winch to a tow strap if you need an extension. A soft shackle basically performs the same thing, but it's soft. It's made out of rope material. And the upside of a soft shackle is that generally, even though they are less, hardy or more prone to wear or are more likely to break out on the trail, is that they're a lot safer. So anytime that you're, winching or pulling or having, opposing forces, if you're using metal, there's always the possibility that metal will still break, and then you have, heavy, large metal projectiles that have the potential to be flung and injure people, vehicles, or, destroy equipment. So if you're only going to get one type, I would honestly say go with a soft shackle and go with the snatch rope. I think is a very essential piece of kit, regardless if you have a vehicle with a full-size spare, or you're a UTV rider and you don't have a full-size spare yet, is simply just, a cheap air compressor that can plug into like a cigarette lighter and a tire repair kit. So the tire repair kits, basically all you do is you find the hole, you punch into the hole to make it bigger, then you take one of these plugs, put it through this hole, punch it in, cut it, make sure it's holding air, and then you fill it up again with the compressor. And honestly, even when I am in a vehicle with a full-size spare, if I can, I will always plug a hole before I switch it to my spare, because I always like to have that in my back pocket in case I tear a sidewall or something like that. So this is relatively inexpensive. You can probably get a compressor, for 40, 50 bucks from Canadian Tire or Princess Auto or whatever automotive store you have around. And these are like 15 or 20 bucks. I would highly suggest, though, that if you have like a spare old tire, on a rim lying around, practice with this first before the first time you have to use it on a trail. Okay, guys, so we're just going to quickly talk about winches. So on my side-by-side, I still have the factory cable winch, and I actually hate cable winches. Yes, they're robust, but I find that, they can give you mental splinters when they start to get worn. They're harder to ensure that they're spooled properly within on the winch itself, and they're more dangerous. As you can see here on my Jeep, I actually have a synthetic line. I prefer synthetic line. Yes, they're less robust. You have to take care of them. You have to service them more. You have to ensure they're not getting torn. But I just find overall they're more user-friendly and they're less dangerous. So we've been talking about winches, and one of the things that I want to mention before I forget is that you want to ensure that your winch is adequate enough to pull whatever vehicle platform you have it on. So you want to go off the gross vehicle weight. So that's the weight of your vehicle loaded down with people and equipment. And the minimum that you want is 1.5. The gross vehicle weight is what you want the pulling power for your winch. If you can go higher, I always suggest that, for the space constraints that you have, for your vehicle platform constraints, and obviously for your budget constraints, buy the best winch that you can, because it's the winch is going to have to work less hard, that the higher capacity of winching power it has opposed to the load that it's pulling, less likely to break, less likely to wear down, and you're also going to be able to recover other people who might have vehicles that are heavier than yours. And why you actually need more pulling power than the weight of your vehicle is because you're never really going to be winching something where there's no resistance. So whether that's, you have mud caked into it, you're pulling through mud or snow, there's always going to be some resistance which will add to the force that the winch needs to generate in order to affect the recovery. So a couple of key accessories I think are important to have for your winch. And the number one most important thing is a pair of really sturdy work gloves, okay? So something with a leather palm, something that's going to provide some sort of protection if your hand gets caught, or if you have your sliding rope to keep you from getting burns or from cutting your hand open on the winch line. I actually saw recently a friend of mine amputated the tip of his finger on a synthetic winch line. So don't think just because you're using synthetic winch that you're going to be safe and that it's not cable. These winches generate a huge amount of pulling force, and this guy is a very experienced off-roader. He knows what he's doing, but he had a momentary lapse of judgment, or he thought he was going to be okay and he wasn't wearing the proper equipment. And even potentially if he was, like, these accidents happen and it could still have happened, but you need to mitigate as much risk as you can to yourself. And all it takes is 1 second and your hand goes to the wrong place, or you slip, and you're going to have a lot bigger problem on your hands than just being stuck. So gloves are a super important piece of equipment. Never touch your line without a set of gloves on. The other thing I want to talk about too is like an accessory that sometimes comes with your winch and sometimes doesn't, but that's just a remote. So in my UTV over there, I actually only have a rocker switch. I don't have a compatible remote for it yet, and that's something that I'm going to be adding very shortly. One, because sometimes when you're doing recovery, it might not actually be safe to be in the vehicle while you're doing that. So you want something that has enough cord that you can get some standoff from the vehicle while you're affecting the recovery using the winch. So there's wired remotes, there's wireless remotes, but just whatever you get, make sure that you know how to use it before you need to, just like with anything else we have here. And make sure it's compatible with the winch you have. And the other reason why it's important to have this is if you're like me and you wheel alone a lot of the time, it's next to impossible without having a remote to properly spool your winch line back up. Because if you don't put it back in there right, it's potentially not going to work next time you need it. It's either going to be bound up, it's going to, load in a way that you're not going to be able to unspool it in a hurry when you need it. And that's the last thing you want. The next thing I want to talk to you about, and I think is an absolute necessity for anybody with a winch, is called a snatch block. I busted this out on the trail a couple times, and I've actually been quite surprised about how many guys who've been off-roading for a long time didn't know what it was. So basically all it is it's a pulley that you can, mount to like a hard location using, your straps or your ropes. And it allows you to basically do a plethora of different things to increase the capability of your winch. Primarily what I use it for is two things. One is if I use this pulley and mount it to the tree that I'm going to be winching to, and then run the cable back to my vehicle, it's going to use a mechanical advantage to reduce the load on my winch and allow my winch to pull me out a lot easier. So it's going to, preserve the internals of your winch, allow it to operate a lot easier, and cause a lot less stress on that. The other thing that it's really good for is you can actually use it for rerouting your winch line. So say if you have like a really good tree that's super strong that you want to winch off of, but it's on a bad angle, because you always want to winch in as straight of line as possible. You can actually use this to redirect that line. So if that's going to be your primary anchor point over on this tree, and there's like a weaker tree or potentially even somebody else's vehicle that might not be heavy enough to bear the weight of your vehicle being pulled out, you can attach this to there, and then it'll redirect the line so that your vehicle is still winching out in a straight line, even though that the tree is not on a perfect straight angle to the vehicle. The last thing I want to talk to you about for at least winching accessories is this tree saver. So basically all it is a strap, very similar to like those traditional tow straps you see. But what it's used for is, rather than putting your winch line around the tree or whatever object you're winching to, you use this instead. So one, it's going to, protect the tree, but it's also going to keep your winch line, from getting frayed, cutting into the tree and getting damaged, okay? So all you do is you basically put this as low as you can on the base of the tree, as far down as you can, while still allowing your winch line to not be running on the ground or, going over any objects. Attach a D-ring and then attach your winch to that line itself. So absolutely essential, just like anything else I said, for you to have if you're planning on doing some. All right, guys, so here comes the preachy part of my video. All my videos have some safety points or some mom points, just the way I am, because I want you guys to go out and have fun and be safe and everybody to get back okay. So one of the things that I always carry with me is a first aid kit. It's bright orange. It stays in my bright orange case, so in case something happens, I'm the first person on the scene and I'm dealing with somebody, it's easy for somebody else to find. But just like anything else that I've shown you guys today, if you don't know how to use this, this is useless. So make sure that if you're serious about being an off-roader, an adventurer, or doing anything in a remote area, to have the proper training, go take a first aid course. It doesn't take long, because speaking from experience, I've seen it, what happens when the absolute worst case scenario happens out on the trails or in a remote area and nobody is prepared to deal with it. Don't be that person. Make sure you got the right equipment and the right training so that you can always be an asset to whatever group you're part of. Last thing I want to touch on before we get into the recovery videos and you can start seeing, real application of the stuff we talked about being used is your owner's manual. always have your owner's manual in your vehicle. It has a plethora of information that you're going to find useful on the trail if anything breaks or something goes wrong, common maintenance practices, all that kind of stuff. And you're not always going to be in a place where you can just pop onto YouTube and be like, oh, how do I do this? That thing will save you so many headaches. If you're a side-by-side, ATV, snowmobile owner, always keep that little tool bag that you get with your machine. Check it periodically to ensure that nothing's missing. If you have like a Jeep or a truck that doesn't come with anything other than a bottle jack and like a tire iron, build your own tool kit. Find out what common socket sizes you need or what kind of wrenches you need, and then as you get more experience off-roading, you can customize a specific tool bag to common problems that you might be having on the trail. And the last thing I'm going to say, especially for you power sports owner, always carry a spare belt. Always carry a spare belt. It's one of the most simplest, field repairs that you can do that'll mean the difference between being towed out or driving out. They're not that expensive, and I don't care if you just changed it. And I know with a lot of these newer machines, with how good the clutching is, that guys are getting 6,000 to 7,000 kilometers out of a belt. Always carry a spare belt, and practice changing your belt before the first time you have to do it, because the last thing you want to be doing is trying to figure it out at 2 in.the morning. You're cold, you're tired, you're hungry, you just want to get back to your base camp or your vehicle, and you're using a headlamp at night to go through your owner's manual to try to figure it out. So that's it, guys. Let's get into the video. Hey guys, so as you can see, I broke the ultimate cardinal rule about snow wheeling, and that's if you can't see the grass, don't stop. So guys, the first thing I always do is I lay out my winch to the farthest I can actually put it out. And why I do this is so that I can see if I have enough winch to run a snatch block. So as you guys can see, this line pull is not ideal. What you want to do is you always try to pull in the straightest possible line you can. It's easiest on your winch, it's easiest on your machines, because if you're pulling to an angle, it's going to put stress on whatever outside wheel is catching in whatever rut that you're stuck in right there. So you can see I've got my tree saver here as low as I can possibly on the tree. I've checked this tree. It does look a little old, but it's going to hold, and I'm not going to kill the tree by winching out on this. As you can see, I've got a clevis hooked up to a kinetic rope here. Hey guys, another thing that you want to do is always put something on the line, and I don't care if it's synthetic or cable. Obviously with cable it's more dangerous, but you always want to put something on the line so that if the line snaps, it's gonna give it more likelihood of just dropping to the ground rather than snapping back and destroying your windshield or potentially hurting you if you're winching from the outside of your vehicle. Another thing I want to talk about too is, you see I'm not wearing them right now just because I'm operating my camera, but always use a set of like durable work gloves. Leather is preferable. So you guys will see in this little clip here that I'm not just using my winch. I'm actually using throttle in combination with my winch. Obviously you don't want to spool your machine up too much and potentially break an axle or a tie rod or something like that when you're winching out, but it doesn't hurt to use a little bit of vehicle power in combination with the winch. Just the biggest thing, if you're new to this, the first time you get stuck, you might get into a little bit of a panic, but just stay calm. Take all the time you need, because I promise you it's going to take you a lot longer to get home if you get in a panic, break something, and then have to walk out. I've adjusted. I went to the other tree actually. One, it's stronger, and two, it's giving more of a straight line pull, which is easier on my winch and easier on my machine. And as you can see, I actually incorporated my snatch block now because I have enough room. I'm no longer buried. My front two wheels are up on solid ground. My back two wheels aren't, but I'm not buried anymore, so I should be able to get out of this. So I'm gonna unhook and try to carry on my way. I know the first comment is gonna be, we should have had a shovel and you should have dug yourself out more. 100%, forgot my shovel. And that's a really good point, is you always want to reduce as much stress on your machine and on your winch as possible. That's why I think snatch blocks are really good, but also you want to move any debris that's dragging on your machine that you can, so you don't break anything. So this is another recovery I got to participate in last week when I was out riding. A buddy of mine flipped his machine. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. His machine didn't really sustain any damage. In the video, you'll see that we actually have two vehicles winching simultaneously, one high and one low, and that's simply to ensure that the vehicle flips over exactly where we want it to. Some things to keep in mind when you're doing this is choose your winching points on the vehicle itself wisely. You want to do something sturdy on the frame so that you're not going to bend or break anything. You want to watch the wheels that are contacting the ground to make sure that when the vehicle comes over, they're not bending or breaking, and you want to take your time. So I even used my snatch block to ensure that I had even more control over how much my winch was winching. And just take your time, do this thing right, and everything will be fine. The other thing that you need to take into consideration is that you want to let the machine sit for a good 20 to 30 minutes before you try turning the key, because this will allow the oil to go back to where it needs to be, and you won't damage the internals of your engine. If you guys like this video, please like, comment, subscribe, and until next time, keep your head up and that throttle down.